continued our new component of letting people zoom in. So we're kind of doing a hybrid here. I just want to acknowledge a couple of guests that we have before we start. The first is Dave Bertolino, who is council member from Ward 5, who's with us here in the community room. And we also have former council member and former mayor, Ed Marshall, who is with us, also from Ward 5. So thank you, Ed, for being here. And the way this works is, for those of you who haven't joined before or been here, when you, this is your time to ask questions and to express your thoughts. And I'm sorry, and Teresa Clark, our new council member who's sitting off to the left here from Ward 1. Welcome, Teresa, and thanks for being here. So the way it works is when you have a question, if you're in the room, just raise your hand and ask. This is your time to talk and let us know your thoughts or get information on things. And for those of you that are Zooming with us, if you can either use the raise hand feature, or I'll try to watch the screen in addition to the room. And if you just wave your hand, we'll eventually see you. So that's the way it works. And last, for those that are in the room with me this morning, there's a sign-up sheet out front. If would be so kind as to sign that and put your contact information in case you have issues that we need to get back with you later. And last thing before we start, sorry, since we're doing this a little differently with our in-person meetings, I just want to mention a couple of safety things. We obviously have masks, if you've seen out front, if you want to wear those, as well as hand sanitizer, and the tray of bagels you may have noticed are gone. So we have individually wrapped food items, but I assure you they're just as good. And coffee is already poured for you, but feel free to do your own refill. So, all right, with all those things, thank you for listening. Who wants to go first? Yes, sir, in the back.
Where you come from southbound
Are we aware of that? Sam, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, we are aware of it, and it feels a little different. I've driven that a few times, and we are checking into that as soon as we can.
So we've apprised MoDOT of that, I guess. Have they given us any sort of an ETA as to when they might be able to do it?
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up. Les?
So we'll continue harping on phase 18. So let's count we have had in the past month a number of instances in the neighborhood of dropping service. I've called, and twice their service technicians have lied to me about telling me the tower over Greensfelder not operating. This week I finally got someone a little bit higher up in the organization. They told me that's not true. That wasn't true, and I was not supposed to be told that. So our neighborhood is now monitoring when our service starts to either drop or decrease. We'll be monitoring on speed test. So what we see is about, for those of us that have the 6 megabit per second package, we're seeing about 1 or 2 megabits per second service. Not all of them, along some of them, it's that automatically. So I did a little bit more research, found out that people are complaining about them driving. So basically they have a system that they cannot support the number of users, the bandwidth requirements. So that in itself is concerning to us. So I looked into how to report them to the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, because that is something that is reportable. However, the amount of work that would go in to document, get that documentation, is just ridiculous. I don't have time to do that. So we continue to just call and complain and so forth. They had a tower on Allenton get damaged during the storm the other night. They were working on it yesterday. I drove by this morning and it's running via a generator. So a little concerned about the capabilities of the company in of itself and how they're handling this. Having worked at Ameren for 19 years at a utility, I know how customers should be served. If you lose service over the weekend, I've lost service over the weekend twice now. They do not make any effort to come out and get you turned back on. So you're just basically out of service till Monday morning. So I've had that happen twice. So I reached out to AT&T. I noticed that I'm starting up a business, and I noticed that I'm looking for some internet providers for my business, and I noticed they have what's called dedicated internet for business. So I called their sales line, and they told me that you can get fiber run to your business. It's not cheap, obviously. But then I started inquiring about, are they working with subdivisions? And they said, oh yes, it's actually very popular to work with subdivisions. They will run fiber to a location within the subdivision, and then it's really kind of the subdivision then to radiate it out to the residents. And the subdivisions really kind of manage the expenses, if you will. So maybe a trustee would take on the billing from AT&T, and then they would then bill their residents. And apparently that's becoming very common with them. Now, the reason why I'm saying all this is I know the city has explored options. This is the first time that AT&T has indicated they will run fiber to a subdivision that does not have service. Again, it is not cheap. However, the question I have for the city is, would they consider exploring, for example, running internet along Allenton Road? The subdivisions would then have the option of connecting to that trunk line, and we would take care of, obviously, our subdivision. If the city would pick up the expense of running the internet fibers along major thoroughfares within Wildwood.
Okay, so you've got two issues here. First one, Bays ET. Have you talked with owner Chris Bay about your issues?
I called and I spoke to one of their service technicians, and Chris or Ryan were supposed to call me back, and they did not call me back.
Okay, so as soon as we're done with this morning, I'll reach out to Chris and see if we can get something scheduled for you to talk with him about the issues and see what happens with that.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would like to have is I would like to see how on their system, what it looks like in there. What kind of service are they able to deliver? Are they oversubscribed? They can tell, they know. So that would be something I would request from Chris Bays if I were the city, because like I said, it's not just me.
Well, yeah, so let's get the facts from him and make sure before we assume that that's the case, that is in fact the case. And if it is, then I think we need to address it with him. Relative to the running of fiber, that would ultimately be a decision for the council. I think it would depend obviously on cost and how many people would be served and that sort of thing. So what I would suggest we do is get those details, work with maybe your new council member, Rob Rambo, who actually has a great deal of experience with these things and has been involved, at least indirectly, with the rural internet committee that we have. And I know he's real committed to that. So I think we could see what the facts are, and then if you know it looks like it's something that's viable, take it to the council and see what they want to do with it. Okay. So thank you for bringing those two things up. Yes, sir.
On the same line, Spectrum ran fiber along BA about a month and a half ago. And they said they were, the technician down there said they were going to bring it up into the various subdivisions. Does the city not know where the cable is? I mean, I told you that before, so they could just put them in the right of way.
Yeah, I don't know that we know where each and every cable is located, but certainly we would have the ability to get at that information if we needed to. But I suspect we don't know where every single cable, is laid. The city administrator is saying that's correct. So, yes, sir.
My name is
Welcome.
I'm in telecommunication industry 20 years. So I know a little bit about really the cost of running stuff there, economies of scale. So basically, there is some issue there. I can talk to afterward about that, give a little insight to that. But it's all about economies of scale.
Yeah.
And some of the systems automatically scale back bandwidth and capacity.
Thank you for being here, and thanks for that But is this your first coffee with me?
Yeah, I'm coming down here.
Excellent. I didn't think I recognized you, so welcome. Glad to have you.
My son, Trey.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so Trey is an intern who's been working with me for the last month or so, has an interest in government and has really just been phenomenal. So we're glad to have him. So, and thank you again for being here. Yes, sir, Jim.
Is Rick or Joe online, or they?
So I knew that would happen, and the answer is no. Rick, I believe, is on vacation, and I'm not sure about Joe.
Joe is off this week as well.
The technical question wouldn't be.
We always have lots of public works questions that are a little over my head. So
Just from an interest standpoint, in the last couple of days, Manchester Road streetscape is starting. I mean, it looks, you can start to see where we're going on that, and they are laying or installing a lot of porous concrete. And I understand the reason why they want to use porous concrete, MSD, you know, to curtail the runoff. I have a very minute experience with porous concrete, and I can understand the sidewalks, low weight bearing, but the parking areas they have also poured with the porous concrete. And so I asked the gentleman if they were taking core samples to verify the structural integrity of it. And they said no, that they weren't required to take core samples. Porous concrete doesn't have the same amount of interior structural strength as regular concrete because there's very small pieces of aggregate in it, not much cement in it. And so I can see the weight of these cars in these parking areas and this thing's starting to crack and crumble. If that happens, is the city on the hook for those repairs? Is there any guarantee from anybody about this?
So that's a great question, and I'm not familiar with the ins and outs of porous concrete, but what I would say relative to that or any other similar issue with our projects, it would probably depend on what the agreement we've entered into with the contractor says. So we'd need to talk with the city attorney and, you know, what kind of warranties are there. All that said, I would just say in general, it's probably going to depend on when that deterioration happens and how it happens. So for example, if they turnkey the project and within 2 weeks we start having issues, I think there's probably a great chance that they're going to be liable for that. If it's 20 years down the road, wear and tear, probably not. But I would say just as a matter of basically reasonable standard sort of approach, given the money that we've spent for that, I would expect the contractor to stand behind what they're doing. So
I think we're kind of on the cutting edge where there hasn't been much of this poured in St. Louis. I said Maryland Heights has some, but as far as the amount, Wildwood is the test case.
all right, Sam, do you have anything to add to what I said there?
No, probably pretty accurate. We do have a project manager that's out there inspecting every day, and you are correct. Porous concrete does have a different structural integrity. Typically, and the reason why it takes longer to pour those, because the longer it cures, typically the stronger it is. So that's why you haven't seen it's not as quick as pouring concrete, waiting a week, and then letting it open it up for traffic.
As a corollary, it's starting to look. I mean, you can see where we're going on this. Now it's just not a bunch of stuff laid out.
Well, so one of the, that's been actually a work in progress for some time, and many people have, they deserve a lot of credit for it. One of the goals that I had for the first 4 years was to sort of get Manchester Road up to a level that was like the rest of town center. Excuse me, not just in terms of structural, but aesthetics, and you know, some of the services such as potentially sewer west of 109, because that's inhibiting growth in that area. So we've made a lot of progress. I think we have more work to do, but I'm with you, glad to see that we're starting to see some of the benefits from it. All those online are being very quiet this morning. Elizabeth Broyles, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I was having a little bit of difficulty hearing some of the questions and comments, but I think it's better now. I wanted to speak to an issue that's coming up on July the 20th with the Planning and Zoning Commissions looking at changing the wait a minute. Changing the I can't find the word. Let me pass right now and I'll look at my notes.
That's fine. We'll come back to you. Councilmember Clark.
Yes, for the residents, just FYI, what are the rules about the fireworks?
It's a great question. So
Can you repeat the question for those of us online?
I'm getting ready to do that. Thanks. Yep. So Councilmember Clark, excellent question. She just asked what are the rules relative to fireworks, given number one, that we have the July 4th holiday approaching. And number two, there aren't many, if any, fireworks displays from municipalities occurring, which excuse me, many believe might cause there to be more people who want to fire fireworks. So we actually have our captain, Captain Mendel, with us this morning. Would you like to respond to that, Captain?
The answer is the fireworks are illegal.
Could he get closer to a microphone, please?
Can't hear him.
They're hard to enforce because they see us coming down the street before we see who's actually doing it, and they usually run inside.
Mayor, we cannot hear him.
Just one second, Captain. So we don't have a microphone capability for everyone in the room. So what I'm going to do is, as soon as he's done, I'll just basically paraphrase what he has said. So just bear with us just 1 second here. Please.
That was pretty much it. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of public displays that are going to happen, so we're going to resort to doing it. So I'm not aware that the city is going to give any kind of permit to every neighborhood association or subdivision. So the ordinance says that you're not to discharge fireworks.
Okay, thank you, Captain. So the short answer is fireworks are illegal, and so our police force will be policing that. There is some difficulty, according to the captain, in enforcing it simply as a practical matter. When people see the police coming, they usually stop. One other thing I just want to mention, our city administrator is adding the questions for the benefit of everyone on Zoom on the webinar chat feature, as well as the answers. So if you can't hear, we're going to do our best to get that information to you, both in terms of doing that, and I'll repeat the questions as well. And thank you for your patience with us on that.
Could I just make a recommendation to the city? What's the actual ordinance that they know in the weekly newsletter? And I think the county's doing a pretty good job on social networking to put it out there, because a lot of people think, oh no, we're allowed to do it, you can do it while it. And I just think the more you remind people, right up including the maximum fines, might help, because I've lived in neighborhoods here where 6 or 7 houses burnt down because of bottle rockets going on a shaped roof. So I just think the more you can help people know it's illegal, and from the city standpoint and then the county standpoint on the social, it might be helpful.
So the suggestion has been made that we add some information in some of our publications coming up, like our city newsletter and so forth, relative to the rules, and we will do that. Ms. Broyles, Commissioner Broyles, did you get your information needed so you can ask, make your question, ask your question or make your comment?
Yes, I do. Thank you. And thank you for your patience with that. So let me reiterate. On July 20th, the commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission will reconvene to discuss and possibly vote on a change of zoning on a piece of property behind the YMCA. It is currently owned by the college. And there are at least 2 subdivisions of nearly 200 residents that are opposed to this. And it's changing that piece of property at the request of an Arkansas real estate developer from the current urban residence district to a C8 planned commercial district. And I would just hope that some of our residents who don't live in Ward 1 or Ward 8, one subdivision is in Ward 1 and one is in Ward 8, that are impacted greatly by this request from this developer. And it would impede it would increase and impede the traffic issues in that area. Mr. Loyal, who is the chair of the TCUT committee, we've been discussing this in that committee as well. And so he's very familiar with those issues. We also would like to state to your residents listening that the traffic study that was completed last winter at the request of, I believe you, Mayor Bolin, we feel as residents that is extremely flawed. And I don't want to go into the issues of that, but I would like to make it fully aware of your attendees today that issue is coming up, and I'd like them to take a look at that, be concerned that over 200 residents are in opposition to that. And I would like for people to be cognizant of that, because it is not in your backyard, but it does impact the Generations Drive, New College Avenue, which right now only has one exit north out of that complex of the YMCA, Wildwood Square, which is a business area there, and the college. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, because sometimes those kinds of things get lost if you live in another ward and you're not on top of, and you can't be on top of everything, I know that, but I'd like for people to take a second look at that.
Okay, thank you. And one thing I would just mention in follow-up to Commissioner Broyles' comment, she referenced TCUT. For those of you that may not be aware, that stands for Town Center Update Team, which Mr. Royal, who's with us this morning by Zoom, is chair of. And thank you, Vince, for your service on that. And what Commissioner Broyles was referencing is that particular group, which it does every 10 years, different people obviously, looks at on a 10-year basis our town center zoning, essentially, which is a subset, if you will, of the overall zoning of the city. So thanks to those that are part of that. And I just wanted to let everyone know that's what TCUT stands for, Town Center Update Team. But thank you for your comments, appreciate it. Vince, did you want to add anything to Commissioner Broyles' comments?
The only thing I would say is that we will hopefully convene again on the 14th of July for in-person meetings, and we welcome community participation. That's a big part of our learning curve, and the programs and ideas we develop. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Sheila, online.
Ms. Yawitz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to add one thing to Commissioner Broyles' comment. yes, it's being proposed to change to commercial, but we're not talking about a barber shop or a nail salon. We're talking about 116 apartments. And that's where the concern of the massive increase of traffic is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dennis, onward.
Yeah, Dennis Lavley. A question in terms of what's going on with COVID. Do we know what the incidence of COVID is in Wildwood? And then now with the new order in terms of masks here in the county, what, if any, enforcement, or is it simply trying to be social pressure and then establishments enforcing it for folks who may be coming into their establishments? How is that mask order being enforced to the extent that it is?
Those are great questions, Dennis, and thanks for being here this morning. Relative to your first question about COVID cases in Wildwood, as you probably know, we have 7 different zip codes for our city, and only 2 of those are within the completely within the confines of Wildwood's boundaries. The other 5 share other municipalities, whether it's Baldwin, Chesterfield, Eureka, and so forth. The county's public data is typically given on the basis of zip code. If you go to the COVID website for the county, that's how it's reflected. And it's also not reflected in terms of specific cases. It's less than 5 per 100,000 people and that sort of thing. So I'm going to do my best, given the information that I have, to answer your first question. And that is, there are few, to my knowledge, if any, cases within the boundaries of Wildwood. A couple of the zip codes, I believe those that share a zip code with Baldwin indicate that there may be some cases. But for example, the 63069 zip code, which is in the southwestern part of our city that shares a zip code with Pacific, is not indicative of cases occurring, or at least less than 5 per 100,000. So that's the best information I have there. I think we've been very fortunate with respect to that in terms of the statistics that relate to our city relative to the COVID cases. Now, with respect to your second question about the county's new order with respect to wearing of masks, I have yet to actually see the order. And one thing that is important, and we've learned in this process, there have been a number of orders that have come from both St. Louis County's Department of Health, well, actually, wrong word, both, from all the above. St. Louis County Department of Health, the Missouri Department of Health, the governor, as well as the St. Louis County Executive Director, Sam Page. So we've learned that it is important when those orders are issued to look at what the orders actually say rather than relying on press reports relative to that, because sometimes it's not accurate to just read what the press says about it. So with respect to the new order as to masks, my plan is to look at that probably today and to determine its implications and what, if anything, we need to do going forward relative to that. That said, my plan relative to our council meetings and other meetings that we have here in which I'm involved is to move back to an in-person approach like we're doing this morning with social distancing and all the other precautions being taken. And thank you for those questions. Jim?
You know, we're spending a lot of money with this, the streetscape, and that's, I guess, Manchester 100. And I guess one of the biggest areas that go through Wildwood. But does Wildwood have a program, or thought about having a program where we have groups, fraternal organizations or social organizations take responsibility for keeping certain sections? Because you make it all pretty, and then you got these IGMOs that'll, throw beer bottles, cans, wrappers, and things out. And I don't think, the city's got other things to do than to send somebody out and pick up trash. I just didn't know whether we had a program that solicits that or not.
Well, before we get, I'm going to let the city administrator, or ask the city administrator to respond to that directly. One thing I'd like to mention just in general before he does that is, since I became mayor, one of the things that I've consistently had as a top priority is what you just hit on, which is keeping our city clean and beautifying public areas to at least a limited degree to make our investments in this city to enhance those. And I think we've done, a good job of that, at least getting started over the last 4 years. One of the things that we do or must do relative to that is involve other jurisdictions such as St. Louis County and the state of Missouri, because we as a city have roads that are controlled, yes, by Wildwood, but we also have several that are controlled by St. Louis County, Old State Road, Clayton Road, Wild Horse Creek Road, and others that are controlled and the responsibility of MoDOT, the state, Highway 100 and 109. But our city administrator will tell you that he gets a number of emails from myself and other people about a tire on the road. He just got one from me the other day that I saw on 109, which frankly was a hazard in my opinion. I think he got one a few days ago, a week or so ago, about the grass needing cut by MoDOT on Highway 100 west of 109. So we monitor that and share your concern with it. Now, with respect to your question about using community groups, Sam, do you want to comment on that?
We used to have a more formal program. I don't know if we still have that program in existence or not. I haven't heard of any requests for pickups or things, but I think the structure is there, and we can certainly look into resurrecting that program if it's there. But I don't think we have a current program right now.
I think it's a great idea. We'll put that on the list, Jim. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I know this is probably a private matter for Dearborn, but Papa Murphy's is going to shut down on July 6th because the dental wants to expand their operation. Work with them to find another location.
So our Director of Economic Development, I don't think is with us this morning, Julian. He probably has, and he's been here previously. He may also be on vacation this week, but I suspect that he has direct knowledge of that. And I simply don't know the details as to whether there is a plan to relocate them. Sam, do you have any information on that?
I don't have a plan, but to the mayor's point, our account manager works really closely with surrounding businesses. When vacancies occur, he knows pretty quickly. We're able to work with the brokers and with the property owners to try to get those filled as quickly as we can.
Yeah, so if you'll make sure we have your email address or whatever, how to reach you, we'll get that answer and get it to you. But I suspect they're unless the business wants to leave, I would expect that they're probably trying to work with them to relocate them to someplace. So I know they've been here for some time, so thanks for the question. Anything else from online, Sam?
Ms. Broyles.
Commissioner Broyles?
Yes, thank you. To tag along with the previous question about COVID, since you're having an in-person meeting this morning, does that mean that we are open for business in City Hall? And I know that that will depend on the COVID virus and whatever the St. Louis County deems safer. But could you tell me about what Wildwood has decided to do? Are we open now for meetings in the building?
Great question. Thank you for that. So a couple of things. First of all, we have consistently held, without exception, all of our council meetings and our planning and zoning commission meetings. We did those by Zoom, as you probably know, for a couple of months, basically, a little more than that. And now we're navigating back to in-person meetings, as I mentioned earlier. Relative to our City Hall, it has never been closed per se. We've had the ability for any resident or people working with the city to make appointments and get things done. But I know what you're asking is in terms of, I think the intent of your question, Elizabeth, is, you know, fully opening the city. My subdivision actually just had our annual meeting here in this room last night. So we are making the transition into that. I would defer to the city administrator. I know he and I have talked about it, and he's been assessing the situation, and they have a date specific. So Sam, would you like to speak to that?
Sir, thank you. Our plans at this point, we're monitoring the St. Louis Circuit Courts because right now they are not allowing in-person payments at our courts window, nor are they allowing in-person court proceedings. So I'm sort of, and the issue with the St. Louis Courts Division is everybody has to be on the same page in terms of there can't be any cases in any of those jurisdictions for 2 weeks until they move to the next phase of their courts reopening plan. So currently we do remain open by appointment only. And as the mayor indicated last night, we are allowing use of the community room and the council chambers. But again, residents or associations have to call ahead to be able to request the use of those spaces. But we remain available online, over the phone, or also if you do need to come in to make a visit in person here at City Hall, we'll be happy to accommodate you.
So Sam, just to follow up, are you saying that court is sort of the tail that wags the dog? In other words, the rest of City Hall can't open without the court system, or can we do one without the other?
We could. I think the issue is most of our in-person traffic here in the building is related to individuals making court payments. So I don't see a need at this point to risk, employ public health and safety, by just throwing the doors to City Hall wide open when we can take care of their needs, through appointment or online. So that's the direction I'm heading right now. But as we get more information on the courts and when they are allowed to resume in-person proceedings and payments at windows, that's probably when we'll look at opening the building again.
Thank you. Am I on speaker?
You are.
Okay. What I was basically referring to, because first of all, let me compliment the staff at City Hall. I've been in and out of your vestibule on the second floor to pick up items that I needed, and everyone has responded courteously and in quick time, actually. But what I was actually referring to were the meetings that many of us are involved in, the committees, the commission. I know that there was the swearing in of the new council people and you, Mr. Mayor. So there were a number of people in there, but we all had masks on. And we intend to wear masks. But does that include those meetings that we would love to come back in person, and the T-Cut as well?
Well, that is an even better question. And so I'm going to be talking, actually, it's on my list to meet and discuss with our Sam, who you just heard from, and get his input going forward. Speaking personally, I would like to see the committees move forward with their meetings and to consider, if needed, and it's a decision to the chair of each one, having an in-person meeting. The fact is that, and I'm sort of a pragmatist on these things, we certainly need to be safe. That's why we have masks available this morning. We have sanitizer available this morning. We are 6 feet apart at least. At the end of the day, I don't think COVID-19 is going away, and we can't use Zoom forever. And we have a duty to our residents to be available if they want to come and petition their government. It's one thing to do it by Zoom. We've done that relatively successfully, but it's a completely different thing to be able to do it in person. And I am in favor of us doing that sooner rather than later with all of our committees, commissions, and boards. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Anything else from the group online? All right, well, thanks. I'm sorry, Councilmember Clark.
For a couple of times, maybe 3 times on the Zoom meetings, we did have student interpreters. However, that stopped after I had announced to the community that we had them. left out until later they could watch and not participate and watch with closed captioning, which is not their language in the first place because it's English in words instead of in ASL. So I was wondering if we have any plans to look into that further and make sure that every time we have a meeting that's open to the public, it's not just private for hearing.
So the question from Councilmember Clark is whether we can have interpreters for the hearing impaired relative to our meetings. And we did have those. I know they were provided by the community college, and then I think something happened with them. They were no longer available. Sam, is that?
So the student interpreters were allowed to participate and receive credit hours as part of their program. But in order to do that, they had to miss a class. And so I think there was just a challenge with scheduling for our particular meetings those evenings and student schedules. So they're able to, for a period, be able to miss those. But I think they need to get back to the classwork. We were not able to retain them for future meetings.
So I would just add, so that's what happened with respect to the student interpreters, but I would add relative to the broad nature of your question about having interpreters. We have 3 standing committees of our council. One of those is Administration Public Works, the other 2 Planning and Parks and Economic Development. And I'm hopeful that, and actually you can ask for this if you want, that our Administration Public Works Committee looks into sooner rather than later, trying to find a way to include sign interpreters for as many of our meetings as possible, particularly council meetings and planning and zoning commission meetings. And I think that'd be the place to start. Let's see if we can get that done. Anything else from anyone in the room? Anyone online? Do you have any other questions or comments?
Got Dennis.
Dennis?
Yeah, just an observation, and maybe I penciled these into my calendar to try to participate, and I guess I thought they were still all virtual. So maybe I just missed it in the weekly newsletter, but I didn't realize that they were in person this meeting as well. So maybe it needs to be clarified, or maybe I just need to pay more attention. But I just kind of call it to your attention that I just thought they were all continued to be virtual.
You're talking about the coffee with the mayor?
Here. Meetings, breakfast with the mayor.
So we publicized that on the city's Facebook page a week or so ago when we made that decision. I also put it on my mayor's Facebook page. That doesn't mean it's the best way to do it, and it can be tough to get information out sooner rather than later to people, but we tried to do that. Going forward, the plan would be to do it as we are today, which is to offer both the in-person and the Zoom option. So if you want to attend in person, Dennis, next month, you're certainly more than welcome to do that. Again, we are taking precautions for COVID relative to that. The other thing that we did was when we were doing it by Zoom, excuse me, we had covered the signs that are around the city with the login information or the URL for that, referring people, I believe, to our city website. That was removed from the signs that we put out every month for this one. You may not have noticed that, but it's a subtle thing, but we did go back to mentioning that it would be, here at City Hall, so.
Yeah. My source of information was the newsletter, and I may have just missed it in the weekly newsletter that comes out on Friday. And I may have simply missed it that they were in person as well as virtual. But if I guess I would simply ask that if in fact it's not mentioned in the Wildwood newsletter, that it be pointed out that you could attend in both ways.
Great point. We will make sure that happens. Thank you.
No other comments?
All right. Well, I guess that concludes the Coffee with the Mayor for this month. Thank you all for being part of it this morning. It's great to see all of you. And thanks so much for everyone that's with us on Zoom and everyone in the room for being part of Wildwood. Have a great rest of the week and happy 4th.